before the rise of Christianity.
Zeus is the bringer of justice and the bringer of civilization.
The creation had a different beginning.
In antiquity, there was no more powerful force than Zeus, except for one, fate.
How could a new religion dethrone the world's most powerful god? Clash of the Gods continues with Zeus. Next Wednesday at 10:40 on History HD.
One of the enduring mysteries of the Battle of Troy is how the Greeks managed to sustain a siege for so many years without their army being destroyed as it tried to penetrate the walls of the mighty city. In 1960, a remarkable archaeological find caused many to rethink their perception of the body armor that existed at the time of the Trojan War. Virtually no armor from the time of the Siege of Troy has survived. However, excavations by Swedish archaeologists of a chamber tomb at Dendra in Greece uncovered an amazingly well-preserved suit of bronze armor. It was from the same period of time as the Trojan siege. During the Trojan War, the main weapon used when firing from a distance was the bow and arrow. But was the Dendra panoply able to protect a warrior from an archer's bow? A champion archer was pitted against the Mycenae armor, and the results filmed in ultra-slow motion.
Well, that was fantastic. This arrow tried to burrow its way through, and it's managed to penetrate half an inch. And it's dented and mangled the head of the arrow there. Would have shocked him, but it wouldn't have hurt the man at all.
Even using the armor-piercing arrow, champion archer Mike Ashington failed to cause significant damage to the panoply. Amazingly, although the third shot struck the edge of the panoply, it veered off, snapping the arrowhead off without leaving so much as a mark on the shiny bronze surface. Another shot finds its target right on the heart, but yet again the arrow fails to do more than puncture the outer layer of the armor plate.
There's no way this guy's been hurt. He's been shocked, he's been terrified, but he's not hurt. He's still living to fight another day.
But what would it have been like to have worn this type of armor?
It would have been incredibly difficult to use. Very heavy, hard to move around. Most fighting happens in the summer, when the temperatures are over 100. You couldn't actually have worn it, let alone fought in it for long, before suffering from heat exhaustion. The warriors who would use it would be chariot-born. They wouldn't actually have to walk or run around much. It's a trade-off between mobility, usability, and its primary function, defense.
The original helmet was made from boar's tusks. This confirms the Homeric tradition of warriors constructing their helmets from hunting trophies. This replica is made with bone sewn onto a leather cap using linen thread or sinew. It's both malleable and very protective. Despite using a leaf head arrow, which was able to cleave one of the bone plates in two, the armor flexed, absorbing the force of the shot. Even at point-blank range, the warrior would have survived.
Yes! Of course, this is the vulnerable part of this sort of armor. He managed to find the gap. It's gone through, broken the edge of the plate, through the leather lining. That really is a bad day.
A champion archer failed to cause significant damage to the armor, but powerful weapons and armor would not be enough for King Agamemnon to penetrate the fortress of Troy. According to the Iliad, the Greek forces unsuccessfully laid siege to Troy for many years.
At the time the Trojan War is set, the Greeks were sadly lagging behind in siege technology.
The Trojans had so far withstood all the besieging forces' attempts to enter the citadel. The walls were specially constructed so as to make it nearly impossible for conventional siege engines to break through. Ditches were built adjacent to the walls so that any approach by a siege engine would be thwarted, and the walls were built at an angle, thereby frustrating attempts to break through. In addition, the Trojans were extremely successful at defending their beloved city.
Besieging these impregnable fortresses was a difficult job. Not only were the walls impregnable, but the defenders would be constantly throwing weapons, dropping stones.
And worse, we now know that the ancients had access to both chemical and biological weapons.
There are lots of stories of chemical and biological weapons surviving from the ancient world. Scorpion bombs, poisonous insects, clouds of smoke.
Archaeologists and scientists have recently discovered that scorpions were used in ancient warfare.
During the Roman siege of Hatra, which is a city in present-day Iraq, the defenders threw pottery jars full of stinging insects and scorpions onto the Roman attackers. There's also evidence of chemical warfare from the ancient world. Naphtha is an inflammable chemical substance, a bit like napalm. The defenders of Hatra were able to throw this naphtha, presumably in pottery vessels, perhaps like these ones, and destroy war machines and cause chaos amongst the ranks.
In 1988, in Hama, Syria, a remarkable discovery was made. It was a set of pottery spheres. These intriguing objects were revealed to be hand grenades dating back 1,000 years. According to Homer, the Trojans used deadly scorpion poison to defeat the Greek warrior Achilles.
In Homer, we've got the death of Achilles, shot in the heel by a poisoned arrow. The ancients had such biological techniques. They knew how to inflict pain and death in a variety of ways.
For a decade, King Agamemnon had laid siege to the impenetrable citadel of Troy, failing to destroy the wealthy and powerful Trojans. Each year, the Greek forces sailed back to Troy in a new attempt to sack the city and reclaim Helen from the clutches of the Trojans.
Throughout the centuries, it's been quite common for warfare to be waged on a seasonal basis, for warfare to be waged in the summer, and people would go home in the autumn where they would be supervising the harvesting of the crops and seeing to the economy that funded their armies.
Each year after the Greek forces had sailed home, the Trojans would celebrate the enemy's departure. But in the 10th year, everything changed. This time, the invading Greeks had come up with a daring, clandestine operation. The man who devised the ingenious plan was Odysseus, a Greek commander and close ally of King Agamemnon. He instructed his military engineers to create what was to become the most famous siege machine in history. The Greeks needed something spectacular because the fortifications and defensive strategies employed by the Trojans were at the cutting edge of siege technology. But is the Trojan horse just a myth? Archaeological discoveries at Troy suggest it was more real than we once thought.
Recent years, the last 5 years or so, there's been some really good archaeology going on at Troy, and they've found a number of things. We always used to believe that Troy was just this citadel on top of this great rock precipice. Apart from anything else, how could you get a horse up there? But now we learn there's a lower town, a big lower town with mud brick walls. So that's something that they could get through. Around those walls, you've got this great double ditch going round the outside, and they found post holes, so it was palisaded, well defended. Now it starts to make sense. Now, they've only got to get through the outer defences.
Excavations at the site have revealed that the construction of Troy's walls ensured that even the most robust siege machine would not be able to penetrate them.
From this vantage point, you get a fairly clear sense of how impregnable the city of Troy would have been at the time of the wars in the late Bronze Age. Behind me, of course, is the northern side of the citadel of Troy, and on top of it, you have to imagine limestone and mud brick fortifications that would have risen about 30 feet high and would have had walls over 10 feet in thickness. No matter how sophisticated the siege engines were, they would have been unsuccessful in conquering the city from this particular side of the mound.
The Trojans would have recognized that the lower town was more difficult to defend. Recent archaeological evidence suggests that Troy was surrounded by a system of ditches that would have prevented infantry, chariots, and siege engines from attacking the walls.
The ditch that you see here is 4 meters wide and up to 2 meters deep. The ditch is a very effective defensive system in a time when you have infantry and chariots. we have excavated here because we have an interruption of the ditch. So this is the main gate, the main entrance to Troy. If there was a Trojan horse, it must have come up here because this was the only entrance to the upper city, to the citadel.
The Greeks' plans centered on the fortification's one weakness, the gate. Odysseus understood that his siege engine needed to avoid the many defenses employed by the Trojans. But did the Greek engineers at the time of Troy possess the skills to create such a sophisticated device? And does any evidence exist from this period of time that supports the use of a siege engine? In 1961, a stunning ancient artifact was found on the island of Mykonos in Greece. It's one of the most significant finds from the ancient world. It's known as the Mykonos vase, and it clearly depicts the myth of the Trojan horse.
One of the most significant depictions of the Trojan horse, mainly because it's so early, it's roughly contemporary with when Homer would have been composing his poems, is the Mykonos vase.
The image shows soldiers inside the massive structure. The shape of the colossal creature has led to fascinating theories about how the Trojan horse was constructed.
Naturalistic representations of horses in art don't occur until the 5th century BC. We have plenty of evidence for how they did depict horses. And they looked like this. It's primitive, it's pagan, it has this elongated fuselage of a body. It has this high camel neck. It's got a purple mane and tail. That was the high status prestige colour of the ancient world that came from a sea snail just off that Turkish coast. You could perhaps put amethyst for eyes, bronze hooves. Now you've got a most splendid art object, and you can see why it seduced the Trojans into taking it inside.
And most importantly, the Trojan horse had to be so well designed that the ruse would never be discovered. Odysseus's plan was to create a siege engine that could house an elite force of soldiers. Once they had sneaked inside the city, hidden within the horse, they would then open the gates for the rest of Agamemnon's troops. But the Greeks had a problem. Where would they get the timber to build such a huge structure? It's believed that they used the materials from their Pentaconta warships to construct the siege engine. It was an ingenious but audacious strategy. But why did the Trojans fall for it? Fascinating new evidence is emerging that points to two very significant factors in the story of the Trojan horse. The symbol of the horse was very important in Trojan culture, and it's thought that Troy was a center for horse trading in the ancient world. This theory has been further verified by the discovery of collections of horse bones by archaeologists excavating in the region.
These are horse bones. They were found in a late Bronze Age fill. It's evidence of horses being used here.
The second possible reason that the Trojans fell for the Greek device was that the horse was a prized symbol in the ancient world, one associated with power and wealth. The finished horse was a magnificent and imposing structure, one that would have attracted the awe of the Trojans as it sat on the shores of Troy. But why did the Trojans bring it into the city?
In order to understand how this ruse might have expected to work, we need to understand the religious mindset of the peoples of that region and that time.
The Greeks had vanished from the plains of Troy, leaving the horse outside the gates of the city. The Trojans believed that King Agamemnon had surrendered and fled back across the Aegean. He had left the Trojan horse as a gift to the gods to ensure a safe passage across dangerous seas. But the Trojans had other ideas for the horse. If they took this beautiful effigy inside their city, they could offer it to their own gods, thereby bringing the magic of the offering onto their side.
A useful way of winning a battle was to attract the opposition gods over to your side. And the best way of doing that was to bring it inside the fortifications, to bring it through the walls and to set it up in the midst of their city, so that this offering from the Greeks, in fact, became an offering to the gods of Troy.
It had taken King Agamemnon